The 5 graphs below were obtained from either the sine function or the cosine function by some combination of horizontal and vertical stretching, vertical shifting, and reflecting about the x-axis. Give a formula for each graphed function. So there is an answer key to this, but I just want to point out that there are many, many correct formulas that will give each of these graphs. In fact, there are infinitely many correct formulas. So it's okay if you don't get exactly the one that I'm making here in the video or the one in the answer key. One thing we'll do to just start here is draw a quick graph of sine, cosine, negative sine, and negative cosine. So here is sine graph. And I'm going to say that I'm calling this thing T right now, I think. So we are saying that this guy starts in the middle and it's on its way up. And then if I graph negative sine of T, it's the same thing but flipped over the t-axis, the horizontal axis. So it's here, and it looks like this. And so for this guy, it starts in the middle and it's on its way down. This one started in the middle and it was on its way up. And then cosine is something entirely different because cosine normally starts at the top. So it starts at the top and it's on its way down. And then negative cosine t is just flipped over the t-axis, the horizontal axis. And so it's here. And this guy starts at the bottom and it's on its way up. So you can get a lot of information about what what a natural choice for the basic function, the parent function is, by just looking at how the graph starts, top, middle, or bottom. And if it starts in the middle, is it going up or down? So let's just take care of that for the functions on this page. So this graph right here, I would say starts at the top. There is only one graph up above that starts at the top. It's cosine. So I'm going to think of that one right there as being a cosine. The second graph starts in the middle, which means we need more info. This one starts in the middle and it's on its way down. So starting in the middle and on its way down is the negative sine of t. Middle and on its way down. And then finally here at the bottom, this guy starts in the middle, which means we need more info. It's on its way up. So the middle and on its way up is sine of t, first graph. Okay, so the other pieces we need are the period and the amplitude and the vertical shift. So let's first find each of these things. So the period for this guy, you can pick one point and then the corresponding point and just figure out how far that is. In this case, that's a distance of 2 pi. So the period is 2 pi, which means there's nothing out of the ordinary here, but I'm going to give you a formula. We know that the period is equal to 2 pi divided by b. And if you multiply both sides by b and divide by the period, you get the b is always 2 pi over the period. So that's useful to have. So maybe we'll put a circle around this thing. That's an important one. So in this case, the b is 2 pi divided by the period. The period is 2 pi. So the b is 1. Just means you don't need to put anything there. But I like that green circle, the formula. So add that to your list of things to know. Next thing to do is find the middle. So let's find the middle. The bottom here is at -1. The top is up here at 3. So then the midline is just the average of those two. So y is equal to the average of those two things. So 3 plus -1 divided by 2, 2 over 2, or 1. Middle is at y equals 1. That seems reasonable. And then the amplitude is just how far you have to go up or down from the middle to the top. Going from 1 to 3 is an amplitude of 2, or going from 1 to -1 is also an amplitude of 2. Okay, so then we put it all together and we'll get our answer. So our answer, maybe we can write up here at the top, our generic formula, the one that we last looked at, was a sine or cosine of bt, and then plus k at the end. And all we have to do is write in the a and the b and the k. Okay, so we said the amplitude was 2. We decided that this was a cosine graph because it started at the top and it was coming down. So this is 2 cosine b we've just figured out is 1. I'll put it, but we don't really need to. And then plus k, where k is the midline. So maybe we can add that over here. This midline is k, it's 1, so plus 1. Oh, I should not have written that there. So the amplitude is 2, and then our final equation is what we just said. And with all of these, you can type that into the calculator and check the work. Think about the window before you just hit graph. So that's one of many possible answers for that first graph. Okay, moving on to number 2, same idea. In fact, if you understood what we just did above and you didn't have a chance to really try number 2 on your own, then pause the video here and come back after you've given it a good shot. Okay, so the same stuff that we talked about before. We need to find the period. So the period is just from one point to the corresponding point. You can find those two things, but I think it might be easier to start with this point here in the middle and then go to the corresponding point. Is it this? No, because we have to wait until we get to the middle the second time. So it looks like the period again is just 2 pi. So that means that the b, according to our new formula up above, is 2 pi divided by the period, which is 2 pi over 2 pi, which is just 1. So it's kind of silly to do it, but I want us to get used to using that 2 pi over the period formula. So that's the period. And then the next thing is the midline. So it's y equals. So, I mean, you can just look at it and know that the midline is right there at 2. But if you really want to process, it's just the average of the high and the low. So the high is up here at 3. The low is down here at 1. So if I do 3 plus 1 and then cut it in half to find the average, lo and behold, we'll get y equals 2 as the midline. That's our k value. Next thing we wanted was the amplitude. It's just how far you have to go from the middle to the top. Looks like 1, or the middle to the bottom, also 1. So the amplitude is 1, and that makes our final answer y equals. So we put the a in the front. Okay, was this a sine or a cosine? Well, we decided that this one was starting in the middle and going down. So it's actually a negative cosine. Sorry, negative sine. And then times bt, b is 1, there's our t, plus the k. K again is 2 in this problem. So ultimately we just get negative sine of t plus 2. Again, that's not the only answer. There are infinitely many answers. Okay, we're going to draw some lines up here to break off number 3 from the problem that we just did. Okay, so looking at problem number 3, first thing again we'll look at is the period. Start there, go until we get the corresponding point. Period here is 4 pi. So that b is actually going to be important in this case. So b is always 2 pi over the period. 2 pi over 4 pi is a half. Next thing we'll do is the midline. So you can look at this and just know that the midline is 0. Of course, you can average the high and the low. So that's the value of k. Amplitude is how high or low this thing goes from the middle. So from the middle to the top is 1. From the middle to the bottom, also 1. Amplitude is 1. And so our final answer here, y equals, so we put the amplitude first. Is this a sine or cosine? Well, it starts in the middle, so that's a sine, and it's on its way up, so it really is sine and not negative sine. b times t, 1/2 t, plus the k value, which is 0, so ultimately y equals sine of 1/2 t. Next page. Okay, let's take a look here. Amplitude, no, so we'll start with the period. So from here to here, looks like the period is 2, which is the first time the period isn't something with a pi in it. And since the period doesn't have a pi, the b will. So the b is 2 pi over the period, 2 pi over 2. The b is pi. The next thing we'll take a look at is the midline. Okay, so I mean, you can try to ballpark. It looks like maybe the midline, I think that's too low and that's too high. So maybe the midline is at 35, but I would always prefer to just use the numbers. The top is at 60, the bottom looks like it's at 10. 60 plus 10 over 2, just to average the top and the bottom. 70 over 2, so 35 was right, but I think it's always safe to just average those two numbers. Okay, next thing we need is the amplitude. So the amplitude is just from the top to the middle, 60 minus 35, or 25. You could also have done 35 minus 10 from the middle to the bottom. So that means our equation is y equals, so we put the amplitude first, 25. Is it sine or cosine? Well, we haven't talked about it yet, but this guy starts at the top. There's only one graph of ours that starts at the top. It's cosine. 25 cosine bt pi t plus k plus 35. Okay, and number 5 is going to stretch us because it has lots of letters in it. Okay, looking at the top point to the top point, here's our period, and it looks like they are calling the period P. It's this distance right here, which means that the B value is 2 pi over the period, or 2 pi over P, and that's just going to be part of our equation. Okay, next thing we need is the midline. Looks like it's just y equals 0 right in the middle. If you wanted to, you could also average the a and the negative a. And of course, they average to 0. So our k is 0. And next thing we need is the amplitude. So how high does this thing get from the middle? Well, it gets up to a, down to minus a, so a is the amplitude. And now we write our equation. The amplitude goes first. We haven't talked about sine or cosine. Where does this one start? Top, middle, or bottom? This starts at the top, on its way down. So for me, it's naturally a cosine. bt. B, we said, was 2 pi over p. T is just t, and then plus k.